Still renting that shoebox apartment? They sneered at the Harper summit. I leaned back, smirking, and said, I own the Chelsea complex you all call home. The boardroom froze in shock. I stood in the penthouse boardroom of Harper Tower, the Manhattan skyline glittering like a diamond-studded trap through the floor-to-ceiling windows. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat a countdown to the moment I'd either save my family's legacy or watch it crumble. In my hand, I clutched a sleek black briefcase, its contents more explosive than any bomb. Inside were secrets that could topple the Harper empire, secrets I'd spent a decade building in the shadows while my relatives, dripping in Armani and Rolexes, sneered at my faded blazer and scuffed flats. They thought I was Abigail Harper, the family failure, the poor cousin who'd never measure up. They had no idea I was the one pulling the strings, the one who'd turned their mockery into a $100 million 0-cents real estate empire. But tonight, with a cyber attack threatening to expose me, a traitor in the family closing in, and a high-speed chase still burning in my memory, I wasn't sure I'd live long enough to reveal the truth. The boardroom smelled of leather and ambition, its mahogany table polished to a mirror sheen. My cousins, Bradley, Victoria, Tyler, Jessica, and Blake, lounged in their seats, their designer labels screaming wealth louder than their voices. Bradley, with his slicked-back hair and $10,000 0-cents suit, was boasting about his new yacht, a 70-feeder docked in the Hamptons. Victoria, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier's light, scrolled through her phone, probably checking the guest list for her next charity gala. Tyler and Blake traded stories about their latest private jet escapades, while Jessica, the only one who'd ever shown me kindness, offered a small smile from across the table. Uncle Richard, our family patriarch, stood at the head, his silver hair and tailored Brioni suit giving him the air of a king surveying his court. To them, I was invisible, a relic of pity they tolerated at these annual Harper summits. To me, they were pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing. Abigail, you made it, Uncle Richard said, his voice smooth but laced with condescension. His eyes flicked over my outfit, a thrift store blazer and a pair of slacks I'd ironed twice to look presentable. We were just discussing the future of Harper Tower. I trust you'll have something to contribute this year? The room chuckled, a low, cruel sound that made my skin prickle. Bradley leaned back, smirking. Yeah, Abby, what's your big update? Still driving that rust-bucket Honda, or did you finally upgrade to a bicycle? I forced a smile, my fingers tightening on the briefcase. Let them laugh. They'd been laughing for years, ever since I showed up at my first summit in a hand-me-down dress, a 16-year-old orphan still raw from losing my parents. They didn't know that while they were blowing their inheritances on sports cars and Aspen chalets, I was studying market trends, buying undervalued properties, and building a portfolio that could crush theirs. They didn't know I owned the luxury condo complex where Bradley, Victoria, and Blake lived, paying me rent while mocking my failure. And they definitely didn't know about the encrypted USB drive in my briefcase, holding proof of my $100 million 0-cents empire and a secret that could destroy us all. The danger was closing in faster than I'd expected. 2 nights ago, I'd discovered a cyber attack on my anonymous LLCs, a sophisticated hack that nearly exposed my ownership of a $40 million 0-cents Midtown tower. I'd spent $50,000, 0 cents, hiring a rogue hacker named Ghost to trace the source, but the trail led to a dead end. A burner phone in Queens. Then, last night, after a clandestine meeting with my lawyer, Mr. Winters, a black SUV had tailed me through Manhattan, its headlights like predator's eyes. I'd floored my Honda, weaving through traffic, nearly kissing the guardrail on the Brooklyn Bridge before losing them in a maze of side streets. My hands still shook when I thought about it. Someone knew I wasn't what I seemed. Someone wanted me silenced. "Abigail," Uncle Richard's voice snapped me back to the room. He was holding a stack of glossy brochures, each one emblazoned with architectural renderings of luxury condos. "We're discussing the sale of Harper Tower. $60 million, 0 cents to Westbrook Development. A chance to modernize our legacy." His smile was all teeth, a shark circling prey. "Unless, of course, you have a counter." The room erupted in laughter again, louder this time. Victoria didn't even look up from her phone. Bradley mimed wiping a tear from his eye. "Oh, come on, Abby, stick to your, what is it you do again, budget consulting?" I set the briefcase on the table, the click of its latches cutting through their laughter like a gunshot. "Actually, Uncle Richard," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins, "I do have something to say, but not yet." I sat down, ignoring their puzzled glances. I needed to bide my time, to figure out who was behind the attacks before I played my hand, because if I revealed my empire now, with a traitor in the room, I might not make it out of Harper Tower alive. The Harper family had been Manhattan royalty since the 1930s, when my great-grandfather turned a small loan into a real estate empire during the Great Depression. By the time my grandmother, Margaret Harper, took the reins in the 1970s, our name was synonymous with power, skyline-defining skyscrapers, exclusive penthouses, and a network of influence that stretched from Wall Street to Washington. But Margaret was different. While her brothers chased flash and status, she built quietly, her wealth a tool for security and impact, not a trophy to flaunt. She'd sit me down in her private library on the 48th floor, her sharp eyes scanning financial reports as she taught me to read market trends like a map. "Abigail," she'd say, her voice low and fierce, "true wealth is power, not a performance. Stay invisible until the right moment, then strike." My parents, though, wanted none of it. Dad, an architect with a love for functional design, and Mom, a librarian who'd rather read to kids than rub elbows with elites, chose a modest brownstone in Brooklyn over the family's gilded cages. Their marriage scandalized the Harpers, who saw Mom as a gold digger despite her disinterest in wealth. I grew up learning that money was a means, not an identity, a lesson that kept me grounded when, at 16, a car crash stole them from me. The police called it an accident, but whispers among Margaret's staff hinted at foul play, a rival developer settling a score. I never found proof, but the suspicion burned in me, a quiet fire that fueled my drive. Margaret took me in, raising me in Harper Tower's shadow. While my cousins got Lamborghinis for their 16th birthdays and summered in the south of France, I drove my parents' old Honda and worked part-time as a data analyst, funneling every penny into investments. Margaret's lessons became my Bible. Buy low, think long-term, stay anonymous. When she died during my senior year at NYU, she left each grandchild $500,000, 0 cents. My cousins blew theirs on condos, yachts, and bad startup bets. I followed Margaret's playbook, snapping up overlooked properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods, living in a one-bedroom walk-up to keep my expenses low. By 30, I owned 18 properties, including a sleek condo complex in Chelsea where half my cousins lived, oblivious that I was their landlord. The Harper Summit, Margaret's idea to keep the family united, had morphed into Uncle Richard's personal stage. A former hedge fund titan, he'd turned our gatherings into a circus of status, where cousins competed to flaunt their wealth and Richard flexed his 40% voting power in Harper Holdings. Every year I showed up, played the part of the struggling cousin, and fed them vague updates about my consulting gigs. They ate it up, their pity a perfect smokescreen, but this year was different. Richard's plan to sell Harper Tower, Our family's heart for $60 million, 0 cents to a rival firm, wasn't just a betrayal of Margaret's legacy. It was a declaration of war. And I was ready to fight. As the summit began, Richard clicked through a PowerPoint, his slides showcasing gleaming condos that would replace Harper Tower. "This is about evolution," he said, his voice booming. "The Harper name must stay synonymous with prestige. Sentimentality won't pay the bills." He glanced at me, his meaning clear. I was the sentimental fool, clinging to a past no one cared about. Bradley chimed in, his smirk razor-sharp. "Yeah, Abby, you's gonna save the tower with your piggy bank?" Victoria giggled, her manicured nails tapping her phone. Even Tyler, usually the quiet one, joined in, muttering something about my sad little car. I let their words roll off me, my mind racing. The cyber attack had come too close, and the SUV chase told me someone was desperate to stop me. Then there was the frame-up. Last night after dinner, I'd found forged documents slipped under my hotel room door, bank statements suggesting I'd embezzled $2 million, 0 cents from Harper Holdings. I'd burned them in the bathroom sink, the smoke curling like a warning. Bradley's smug grin across the table told me he was behind it, probably hoping to discredit me before I could make a move. If the police had raided my room, I'd be in cuffs right now. Clara, our housekeeper of 40 years, had slipped me a note during a coffee break. "Mr. Richards meeting with Westbrook tonight," it read. "Secret, 49th floor." Clara, with her warm hugs and sharp eyes, had been Margaret's confidant, and now she was mine. Her warning confirmed my fears. Richard wasn't just selling the tower. He was colluding with Westbrook to exploit a loophole in Margaret's trust, one that could strip me of my voting share. If he succeeded, my 35% stake, built through years of covert acquisitions, would be worthless. The room grew hotter, the air thick with their arrogance. Richard moved to the next slide, outlining the payout structure. He'd walk away with $24 million, 0 cents, his kids and siblings splitting most of the rest. My 1.5% share, based on my declared assets, would net me a measly $900,000, 0 cents. "Fair, don't you think?" he said, his eyes daring me to object. I stayed silent, my briefcase a ticking bomb under my hand. I'd planned to reveal my empire tomorrow, but with danger circling, I wasn't sure I could wait. The traitor! Whoever was feeding info to Westbrook could be anyone in this room. Even Jessica, my only ally, had access to family records as the company's medical consultant. "Any questions?" Richard asked, his tone signaling the discussion was over. I raised my hand, ignoring the eye rolls. "I'd like to propose an alternative," I said, my voice cutting through their murmurs. "Harper Tower isn't just a building. It's our legacy. What if we turned it into a foundation headquarters? Affordable housing, financial education, Margaret's vision?" The room went quiet, then erupted in laughter. Bradley slapped the table. "A foundation. What's next, Abby?" "A soup kitchen," Victoria snorted. "Stick to your spreadsheets, darling. Leave the big ideas to us." Richard's smile was cold. "Creative, Abigail, but impractical. The market demands progress, not nostalgia. Let's vote." Hands shot up, his allies falling in line. Jessica hesitated, then raised hers against the sale, her eyes meeting mine with quiet support. My vote followed, a futile gesture against Richard's block. The sale was approved, 85% to 15% dot. As the room buzzed with excitement, I felt a chill. This wasn't just about money. Someone wanted me out of the picture. After the session, I slipped into the elevator, heading to the 48th floor. Margaret's library was my sanctuary, its oak shelves and leather armchairs untouched by Richard's renovations. I locked the door, my hands trembling as I opened the briefcase. The USB drive gleamed under the desk lamp, its encryption holding my portfolio, and something else. a file Margaret had left me, labeled Westbrook. I hadn't cracked it yet, but her handwritten note, tucked in her old journal, haunted me. Trust no one, Abigail, not even family. Did she know about the crash that killed my parents? Was Westbrook involved? My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Sell the Midtown Tower or your niece pays the price. My blood ran cold. My niece, Lily, Jessica's daughter, was only 10. I called Jessica, my voice shaking. Is Lily okay? She sounded confused. She's at school. Why? I didn't tell her about the threat, not yet. Instead, I dialed Ghost, my hacker. Trace this number, I said, forwarding the text, and double the firewall on my LLCs. His reply was curt. On it. But whoever's after you, they're pros. I paced the library, Margaret's portrait watching me from the wall. Her eyes, fierce and knowing, seemed to urge me forward. I pulled out her journal, flipping to a page I'd bookmarked. Westbrook's CEO, Daniel Kane, was my partner once, she'd written. He betrayed me. If you're reading this, Abigail, he's coming for the tower. My breath caught. Kane was behind the sale, and maybe the attacks. But why now, and who in the family was helping him? A knock at the door made me jump. Abigail? It was Clara, her voice urgent. You need to see this. She handed me a folded blueprint stolen from Richard's office. It wasn't just condos. It showed a new Westbrook headquarters replacing Harper Tower with Richard's initials on the deal. He wasn't selling for profit. He was handing our legacy to our enemies. I thanked Clara, my mind racing. I had to act, but every move felt like stepping into a trap. Back in my hotel room, I checked the locks twice, the city's humid, distant roar below. I plugged the USB into my laptop, entering the encryption key. The portfolio loaded. 18 properties, $100 million, 0 cents in assets. My life's work. Then I opened the Westbrook file. It was a contract dated 1995 between Margaret and Kane. They'd co-owned a Brooklyn development, but Kane had forged her signature to sell it out from under her. She'd fought back, winning Harper Tower in court, but Kane vowed revenge. At the bottom, in Margaret's handwriting, he'll try again. Protect the tower, Abigail. My phone rang. Mr. Winters. Abigail, I've got the trust documents ready, he said. Margaret's legacy trust can block the sale, but you'll need to reveal your shares tomorrow. I hesitated. If I do, they'll know everything. He sighed. You can't stay invisible forever. Margaret chose you for a reason. I hung up, staring at the city lights. Tomorrow I'd face my family, expose my empire, and confront a traitor. But tonight, I was alone. A target in a game I hadn't chosen. As I drifted to sleep, the SUV's headlights flashed in my mind, a reminder that my enemies were closer than I thought. Somewhere in Harper Tower, a snake was coiled, waiting to strike, and I had no idea who it was. The air in Harper Tower's penthouse boardroom felt like it could ignite with a single spark. My relatives' laughter still echoed in my ears, their mockery a familiar sting, but tonight it fueled me. I stood at the edge of the room, my black briefcase a silent sentinel by my side, its contents, proof of my $100 million 0 cents empire, and a cryptic file from my grandmother Margaret, burning a hole in my resolve. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the windows, a cold, beautiful reminder of the stakes. Uncle Richard's plan to sell Harper Tower, our family's legacy, to Westbrook Development for $60 million 0 cents, wasn't just a betrayal. It was a declaration of war. And I was no longer the Abigail Harper they thought they knew, the poor cousin, the charity case. I was a financial strategist who'd outmaneuvered them all, and tonight I'd make them see it. But with a cyber attack threatening to expose my empire, a traitor in the family leaking my moves, and a chilling text about my niece Lily's safety, I wasn't just fighting for legacy. I was fighting for survival. The summit's second day began with a veneer of civility, but the tension was palpable. Richard stood at the head of the mahogany table, his silver hair catching the morning light as he clicked through slides of luxury condos destined to replace Harper Tower. "Brand prestige," he declared, his voice booming with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. "The Harper name must evolve. Sentimentality is a luxury we can't afford." His eyes flicked to me, a subtle jab at my modest blazer and lack of designer flash. My cousins, Bradley, Victoria, Tyler, Blake, and Jessica, nodded along, their Rolexes glinting, their faces smug. Bradley in particular leaned back with a smirk, his $10,000 zero-cent suit a silent boast. "Abby, you got any big plans to save the tower with your, coupon clipping skills?" The room chuckled, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. I gripped the edge of my chair, my knuckles white. They had no idea I owned the Chelsea condo complex where Bradley, Victoria, and Blake lived, paying me rent while sneering at my budget lifestyle. They didn't know I'd spent the night with Mr. Winters, my lawyer, frantically closing a loophole in Margaret's trust that Richard was exploiting to sell the tower. And they definitely didn't know about the text I'd received at 2 a.m. "Sell the Midtown Tower or Lily's gone by dawn." My niece, Jessica's daughter, was safe, for now. Jessica had confirmed she was at school with extra security, but the threat had kept me up, my heart racing as I traced the message to a burner phone in the Bronx. Ghost, my hacker, was still digging, but the clock was ticking. "Any objections?" Richard asked, his tone daring anyone to challenge him. I raised my hand, ignoring the eye rolls. "I have a proposal," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Harper Tower isn't just real estate. It's our history. Margaret wanted it preserved as a symbol of responsible stewardship. Why not turn it into a foundation headquarters, affordable housing initiatives, financial literacy for underserved communities?" The room fell silent, then erupted in laughter. Bradley slapped the table, his face red with amusement. "A foundation? Abby, stick to your spreadsheets. This is the big leagues." Richard's smile was colder than the February wind outside. Creative, Abigail, but impractical. The market demands progress. Let's vote. Hands shot up, his allies falling in line like trained soldiers. Jessica hesitated, her eyes meeting mine with a flicker of support, then raised her hand against the sale. I followed, my vote a symbolic defiance against Richard's 40% control. The sale passed, 85% to 15%, and the room buzzed with excitement as Richard outlined the payout structure. $24 million, 0 cents for him, crumbs for me. I sat back, my briefcase heavy with secrets. They thought they'd won, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in excess. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the dining room, where my relatives flaunted their wealth like peacocks. Bradley bragged about his new 70-foot yacht, docked in the Hamptons for client entertaining. Victoria gushed over her $2 million 0 cents art collection, name-dropping Basquiat and Warhol. Tyler and Blake debated the merits of their latest private jet upgrades, while Aunt Catherine, Richard's sister, boasted about her charity gala that outdid last year's by $200,000, 0 cents. She turned to me, her smile dripping with pity. "Abigail, dear, you really should join us at the next gala. We could find you a donor list to start with." The table chuckled, and I took a sip of water to hide my clenched jaw. Excused myself early, needing air. In the hallway, I overheard Richard's voice through a cracked door. "The condo complex owner's anonymous, but Jenkins says we can lean on them. A few calls to the city, some code violations, maybe a tax audit, they'll sell." My blood ran cold. He was talking about me, the mystery owner of the Chelsea complex. I slipped away, my mind racing. Richard wasn't just greedy, he was ruthless, willing to weaponize the family's influence to bully me into submission. But who was feeding him intel? Someone knew enough to target my properties, to send that text about Lily. The traitor was in this building, maybe even at that table. I retreated to Margaret's old office on the 48th floor, locking the door behind me. The room was a time capsule. Oak shelves, leather armchairs, her portrait gazing down with fierce eyes. I opened my briefcase, pulling out the encrypted USB drive. It held my portfolio, 18 properties, $100 million, 0 cents in assets. But also Margaret's mysterious Westbrook file. I hadn't cracked it yet, but her handwritten note haunted me. Trust no one, Abigail, not even family. I rifled through her desk, desperate for clues, and found a hidden compartment under a drawer. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, addressed to me. If you're reading this, Abigail, it began, Daniel Kane is coming for the tower. He betrayed me in '95, and he'll betray you too. Protect our legacy. My pulse quickened. Kane? Westbrook's CEO, had been Margaret's partner? The crash that killed my parents flashed in my mind. Was it really an accident? A soft knock startled me. Abigail? It was Jessica, her trauma surgeon's calm, masking worry. You okay? You left dinner fast. I hesitated, then let her in, hiding the letter. She noticed the USB drive, her eyes narrowing. What's on that? She asked. I trusted Jessica. Her kindness had been my lifeline, but Margaret's warning echoed. Just work, I said, deflecting. She sat on the arm of a chair, her cashmere sweater a quiet contrast to the family's flat. Richard's rewriting the trust tomorrow, she whispered. He's consolidating power, cutting out smaller shareholders like you. I overheard him with Jenkins. Be careful. Her warning hit like a punch. Richard wasn't just selling the tower, he was trying to erase my stake entirely. I thanked her, my mind spinning. After she left, I called Mr. Winters. Richard's rewriting the trust, I said, pacing. We need Margaret's legacy trust finalized tonight. He sighed, his voice crackling over the line. It's done, but revealing your shares tomorrow will make you a target. Are you sure? I looked at Margaret's portrait, her strength stealing me. I'm sure. Send the documents. As I hung up, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the burner. Midtown Tower, 24 hours. Or Lily's gone. My stomach dropped. I forwarded it to Ghost, my hands shaking. Find them, I typed. Now. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night in my hotel room, blinds drawn, reviewing my portfolio. Property deeds, financial statements, corporate structures, $100 million, 0 cents, built on Margaret's principles of patience and anonymity. The Chelsea complex, my biggest gamble, had cost $40 million, 0 cents, nearly all my liquid assets, but its value had soared, and my improvements, security upgrades, modern amenities, had made it a tenant magnet. Even if Bradley and Victoria whined about construction noise. I pulled out Margaret's journal, its pages filled with my teenage notes and her annotations. Excellent analysis, Abigail, she'd written beside my first $500 0 cents investment. Think 10 years, not 2. That discipline had built my empire, but now it was under siege. At 3 a.m., Ghost called. The burner's linked to a shell company in the Caymans, he said. Same one funding Westbrook's bid for the tower. Someone's playing both sides. My heart sank. The traitor was tied to Westbrook, and likely sitting in tomorrow's boardroom. I thanked him, my mind racing through suspects. Bradley with his forged documents. Victoria, whose art deals could be a front for laundering, or someone else, hiding in plain sight. Dawn broke over Manhattan, the skyline a jagged crown against the sky. I dressed with care. A tailored charcoal suit, Margaret's pearl necklace, my mother's pearl studs. Not flashy, but deliberate. a nod to the women who'd shaped me. In the mirror, I saw not the orphaned teenager they'd pitied, but a warrior ready to reclaim her place. I applied red lipstick, a slash of defiance, and headed to Harper Tower. The final day of the summit would be my reckoning. The boardroom was a battlefield, my relatives in their usual formation. Richard at the head, his allies flanking him, lesser players like me relegated to the edges. Jessica gave me a nod, her eyes wary. Richard opened with a net worth chart, a bar graph projected on the screen. His column towered in navy blue, his children's and siblings substantial but smaller. Mine was a sliver, 1.5%, sparking chuckles. As you can see, Richard said, his smile thin, some of us contribute more to the Harper legacy than others. Bradley leaned forward, grinning. Abby, still scraping by. Maybe we should set up a GoFundMe for you. The room laughed, Victoria's giggle the loudest. I stood, my briefcase in hand, and walked to the front without permission. The room quieted, their smirks faltering at my audacity. Before we finalize the tower sale, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade, I have a presentation. Richard checked his watch, impatient. We're on a schedule, Abigail. Make it quick. I opened my briefcase, pulling out a single document. My portfolio valuation, $100 million, 0 cents. Display this, I told his assistant, handing her the file. As it appeared on the screen, the room went deathly silent. This is my net worth, I said, meeting each pair of eyes. $100 million, 0 cents. Built over a decade while you mocked my budget lifestyle. Bradley's face reddened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Victoria's phone slipped from her hand, clattering on the table. I distributed copies of my financial statements, watching their expressions shift from disbelief to shock. You live in a shoebox, Aunt Catherine sputtered. You drive that junker, I smiled coolly. By choice, not necessity. Margaret taught me that displaying wealth and building it are opposing goals. I chose the latter. I pulled out another document, the ownership papers for the Chelsea condo complex, and placed it in front of Victoria. And regarding the mystery owner you plan to bully with audits and code violations, I said, my voice steady, you're my tenants. The room erupted. Blake knocked over his coffee, swearing. Bradley slammed his fist on the table, shouting, this is fraud. Victoria, pale as a ghost, fainted dramatically, her husband catching her just in time. Richard's face was gray, his hands trembling as he flipped through my documents. How? He whispered. Without our network? Margaret's principles, I said. Patience, research, value over flash. While you were buying yachts, I was buying properties with long-term potential. I turned to Bradley. Your unnecessary guest policy? That was my response to pool area break-ins, Victoria's disruptive construction, security upgrades after a robbery on your floor. Their stunned faces were almost comical, but I wasn't done. I placed the final document on the table. Margaret's Legacy Trust. As of this morning, I said, I've transferred my assets to this trust, which also acquired Jenkins Development, your silent partner. That gives me 35% of Harper Holdings, enough to veto the tower sale. Richard's jaw dropped, his composure shattered. Impossible, he stammered. We'd have known. I leaned in, my voice low. You were too busy underestimating me to notice. Jessica clapped slowly, a grin spreading across her face. Well played, cousin. The others were frozen, their world upended. Bradley sputtered. You can't just swoop in and take control. I fixed him with a stare. I'm not taking control, Bradley. I'm saving Margaret's legacy from people who've forgotten what it means. I gathered my documents, my heart pounding but steady. The tower sale is off, and I'll be reviewing your rent discounts. They're generous compared to other tenants. Richard recovered, his voice oily with new respect. Perhaps we should discuss a partnership, Abigail, a collaborative approach. I shook my head. Any collaboration will follow Margaret's values. Stewardship, not status. Start there. I returned to my seat, the room buzzing with shock and recalibration. Victoria revived, whispering furiously to her husband. Bradley glared, his pride wounded. Aunt Catherine stared at her portfolio as if it might explain how I'd outmaneuvered them. As the summit adjourned, Jessica pulled me aside. "You were incredible," she said, her eyes shining. "But be careful, they're not done." I nodded, the weight of the USB drive in my pocket a reminder of the dangers still lurking. The Westbrook file, the traitor, the threat to Lily, none of it was resolved, but for the first time I felt seen, not as the poor cousin, but as Margaret's true heir. That night, I stood in Margaret's rooftop garden, the city sprawling below. Harper Tower would become the Margaret Harper Foundation, a hub for affordable housing and financial literacy, just as I'd promised. Clara found me there, her weathered hands holding a cup of tea. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said, her voice soft. "She always said you had her heart." Tears pricked my eyes, not from pain, but from the peace of knowing I'd honored her. The fight wasn't over. Somewhere a traitor was plotting, and Kane's shadow loomed. But as I looked out over Manhattan, my Honda waiting below and my empire secure, I knew I was ready. They'd underestimated Abigail Harper for the last time.